digitaljamsessions.com. Today we are joined by Wendy Rosenthal of Hyper Entertainment, Paul Crick at IBM, and Maxim Jago, who is a futurologist and works unto himself, unless you have a particular business you would like to associate yourself with, Maxim.
Yeah, I'm working with a company called Film Do as well. It looks like ArxPax now, the hoverboard people, possibly, maybe. A few different companies as a consultant in one form or another.
Okay. And your role at Film Do, just for those who don't know what Film Do is?
Well, Film Do is an online TV-on-demand film distribution service, so you can watch movies on the website, and I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for them.
Wonderful. And Paul, why don't you explain to us exactly what you do with IBM?
Sure. I lead the music industry practice within Global Business Consulting Services, which is looking at how we can apply technology to help improve and help the music industry grow. So the different components of that, whether that's recording or live, but a number of domains.
And Wendy, why don't you explain to us what Hyper Entertainment is all about?
Well, Hyper Entertainment is a marketing and business strategy consulting firm that has worked around the world with a lot of real estate developers that are interested in incorporating entertainment into their projects, but also with companies that are looking to switch from one consumer focus to another. We help them on a holistic basis look at how they can market to a new consumer base through traditional advertising, new digital media, and also in the interactive game industry.
And speaking very briefly about the games industry, Wendy is the former, now let me get it right, it was the Chief Brand Officer at Jagex?
No, actually the Chief Marketing Officer.
Chief Marketing, I wasn't sure there for a moment. I wasn't quite sure what title they gave you in the end. But yes, Wendy is ex-Jagex as well. So, now that I've got you all in the same place to have this conversation, the nature of Digital Jam, we love to mix up the different industries and take a new perspective on a specific issue at hand. And for this particular group, we wanted to talk all about the emergence of digital content across multiple platforms, especially given that we now have somebody from each of the respective industries. We have somebody from film, games, and also music. So, starting with Paul, I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think are really the new emerging platforms for music.
Well, I think everybody's familiar with the fact that streaming is surpassing downloading in terms of the way consumers are choosing to buy and listen to music. I think what's interesting is that you're dealing with, certainly on the primary platforms, limitations in terms of content. In other words, whilst 25 million tracks sounds like not a limitation, that if you look at the major platforms, that's effectively what you're buying into. And it's how do you so the challenge for those people is how do you switch from of being free, which I know Universal are starting to become very outspoken about. They're saying clearly free is not a business model. It's a great tactic or a potential strategy, but it's not something that is sustainable in the long term. So there's that issue. How do you monetize content in a way that provides fair value for money, fair value in exchange? The other thing to think about is how do you do discovery? I saw a depressing statistic, which I can't quite remember, but it was something like something around 50% or so of people listen to the same top tracks, that are played on the radio. So it's all the popular hits, and you think, well, that's a shame. That's sort of limiting people's experience of music, which is a sweeping generalization. So discovering how do you discover music? How do you find a way through reams of content to find the music you like? Most of the discovery is still done by traditional channels through radio. So that would be one of the things I'd certainly point to. I think the other thing I point to is the live experience. There is a considerable amount of money being left on the table because certainly in the music industry, the live industry is fairly fragmented. The way royalties and rights are administered is extremely complex. But there is an opportunity to be more surgical about ways in which to engage people prior to a live event, during a live event, and post a live event, and to join all those three things up to have an experience. The technology allows us to engage with the fan directly, and I don't think people have necessarily yet got hold of how best to do that.
Okay, that's very interesting in terms of mentioning there about discoverability. And I think this is an area that Maxim, you can probably, throw in a couple of cents worth here. I know that FilmDo is primarily about discoverability and about identifying new film experiences. How do you guys go about something like that with a platform like FilmDo?
Well, I think it's an enormous challenge. And I think that this thing is something that we need to think about very carefully as the amount of data is blooming. Something I've been saying for a long time now is that, the flowering of the information age is big data. It's ready access to enormous amounts of information. But I think the fruit of the information age is the curation of that data. And that's really the origin of FilmDo. I came on board with FilmDo because I gave a talk about this, and Virada, who runs the company, co-founder, came over and said, hey, that's exactly what we're doing. So I think there are a couple of ways of doing this. Well, three ways, really. One way is that you have clever people look at the information and select things that they think you should hear or see or eat or buy or whatever. And that's the traditional model. And, there you go. That's the small number of tracks that people are hearing on the radio. I think another way is that you use, if you like, crowd intelligence. So you use some form of social media, some kind of system that aggregates and averages out interest from a large number of people. And it's one of those things where if you're in a very large building with a great many people in it, and you ask every single person in the building how many people they think are there, you'd probably find that the median average of every number they come up with is pretty close to the exact figure. It's one of those weird things about statistics. So I'm a great believer in looking up products on Amazon and finding a product with the most reviews that are quite okay and just buying one of those because it's probably going to be all right. But I think as we move forward, and that's, by the way, that's the model we're using at FilmDo. So we are allowing people to recommend and share and announce and celebrate films that they're interested in. And the more people that do it, the higher it rises up the list for other people to discover. So it's the users themselves are generating the interest. But I think as we move forward, we're going to find that there's just too much data even for a system of that kind. And I think we're pretty much at that point now. There's just too much available information. And so we've got some traditional forms where people are making recommendations. But I forecast that we're going to have to depend upon AI. And I think that we're going to increasingly find that artificial intelligence is managing the curation process for us in much the way that Google Maps will tell us how to get from A to B using the most efficient route. AI will begin to profile us as consumers of intellectual property and make recommendations based on its capacity to manage that amount of data.
So, if that is the case, Wendy, do you think that for the games industry, at least, we are now seeing kind of a twilight, if you like, for those big AAA titles and those big releases, similar to the movie industry, big releases? Are we moving now to an era of discoverability through artificial intelligence or recommendation engine?
It's so interesting in listening to both Paul and Maxim. I mean, I believe that the games industry faces exactly the same issues. They're no different, and I feel like you're dealing with, for the games industry, it is about how to find the games. And then it's once you find them, people don't want to play them. They don't want to spend money on them. They want to play them for free. So it's absolutely the same thing. I do believe that you're correct in saying that the big titles, it's kind of going down into the area of films. And I'm sorry, I'm not being very intelligent about it, but I can't disagree with what's being said. I think it is going to be coming down to how artificial intelligence helps people rake through the muck? How do you find the game titles that you're looking for? I mean, I can come at it also from a perspective of being a mom who has a 2.5-year-old who's incredibly adept at using my iPad, my smartphone, knows how to get to places. And I'm constantly looking for ways to sift through the thousands of titles that are going to be interesting to him. And the enormity of it is a bit overwhelming. And so I think that for sure the everyday person just wants a way to find the most interesting, fun, and relevant games to them or to their family. So I can't disagree with anything that's been said.
I find this an interesting area of discussion, actually, is this notion that we are kind of educating a whole new generation who consider media consumption in a completely different way to the way that we may have done, when we were that age. The nature of technology that's available to us, the nature of the culture of how open we are with information and also with media is completely different to how it might have been back in the day of our youth. And Maxim, I'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of what we think we're doing with this next generation of youth who are kind of not just becoming consumers of content, but also becoming generators of content. They're content creators at a shockingly young age these days. Anywhere from even 8 years old, you can find these kid content creators on places like YouTube, even though technically they're not supposed to be there. What's your view on this, Maxim, in terms of how we are shifting culturally to re-educate our youth?
Wow, that's an enormous question. I think the short answer is that it's going to be cool. It's going to be okay.
I love the brevity of your responses.
Yeah. We've been through the commoditization of the media creation process. And now, when Google bought YouTube, the naysayers were saying, what's the point? There just isn't that much content. Why are people going to want to watch poor quality video on the internet? And what Google realized was that, it's Moore's law. They knew that the way things were going, we were going to have high quality video that was ubiquitously accessible. And it was going to be the norm for people to be generating their own content and sharing their own content. I think that we know where we're going with this is if you look at the use of social media by young people. It used to be Facebook, and there was this big thing about young people not being on Facebook anymore. That's not true. They are on Facebook, but they use it in particular ways. Then they've got their other social networks that they're using for more private discussions with their friends, which is the equivalent of standing on a street corner when we were younger. They want privacy, but also they want to be accessible and want to be able to access other people. And what's interesting about this for me is that if you look at the development of technology and you look at the development of complex culture and civilization in general, we as a species have not evolved anything like as fast as our complex culture. So what we're seeing here is the manifestation of quite basic human needs with ever more advanced and complex technology. And everybody, everyone likes to be liked, everyone likes to be liked, everyone loves to be loved, everyone wants to be wanted. Everyone needs to have a sense of purpose and a relationship with other people as part of a community. So what we're seeing is ever more efficient and evolving ways of achieving something that we felt hundreds of thousands of years ago. So where I see things going is, it used to be that young people were sharing posts on Facebook and Twitter. People are increasingly using Vine, and after Vine, it became Instagram. It's increasingly visual. But the reason it's visual isn't because we've suddenly become more visual. We were always visual. We just didn't have an easy way of doing it. Where I see things going is in the direction of an increasingly, if you like, intellectual property-based ecosystem, where people are somehow, we need to find a way to record and share and announce ideas in their purest form. And something is going to do that. This is what I'm calling the third social network. You've got LinkedIn for professional identities. You've got Facebook for social identities. But there's another social network out there that will be to do with who we are in terms of our interests. And I think young people will be leading the way with that.
Okay, I'm just going to throw this one out there because I know that we've talked about this one before, Maxim, but this notion that we are educating a generation into learned helplessness on the modern technology that we have right now.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I think that there's very few things that really upset me. One is any form of injustice, and the other one is learned helplessness. Learned helplessness.
I know, that's why I baited you with it.
Learned helplessness is this belief that even if you actually do have the power to do something about your situation, you believe that you do not. And it's a concept that came from some really horrible experiments with dogs many years ago in cages. Now, the idea is that you believe you're caged even if the door is open. I actually don't agree. I think that our relationship with information is changing, and historically we've had this belief that you need to learn your times table, and you need to remember the capital cities of countries and so on. All of that's going away. What you need to know now is how to access information, and the information is increasingly readily available. Now we're about to see the iWatch and a bunch of other smartwatches come on board. I've said for a long time, it's not the fact that you have a terminal for your phone that's interesting there. It's the fact that it's connected to your body. And as the array of sensors included with these watches expands, we're going to have increasingly detailed and rich information about what's going on inside of us. You can get a cardiogram, surface electrical resistance, that kind of thing. We're going to become actually increasingly self-aware. So as you eat food, you're going to get feedback on what it does to your heart. As you're in a particular environment, we'll have miniaturized molecular analyzers that will sniff the air and tell you what's going on around you. We're going to have all of this feedback information, which makes us, I think, more present, more aware, and more in control. The scary thing for me is not the belief that people are powerless. I think the opposite is happening. And I think that's one of the fruits of, or one of the flowers in the information age, that people know what's going on. And when you're aware and knowledgeable, you have control. That's the important thing about unknowns and knowns, is that if it's an unknown, it's a threat to us because we lose self-control. If you know it, then you have self-control. For me, the interesting part is that we're becoming, if you like, more aware of ourselves and our world, but non-geographically. We're becoming entities in a virtual space, and I don't think it's helplessness. I think the scary part is that because we're so easy to manipulate as a species, organizations like, say, Google, for example, they have 57 different factors when you perform a Google search. They can just serve up data that appears to be neutral without it being neutral. And so, again, I think the curation of the data is crucial. If you look at Google searches or look at news services, we tend to believe that they are telling us the truth. You've got that white coat syndrome that makes us believe if it's in print, it's real. This is not true. But they're so good at serving up that information now, we don't realize if we're being lied to or if information is being withheld. That is a form of helplessness.
Okay, and here's the but. And I'm going to ask this one to Wendy, because Wendy is a mother of a young child, so she's got a stance on this, I'm sure. But I totally agree and understand where you're coming from here, Maxim. But I would ask this. Are we not making our next generation lazy? For example, we say that we're facilitating them to be able to use technology to find the information. So nowadays that they are able to literally find the answer to anything. But does that mean that they're forgetting the process of actually how to get from their question to their answer? What's your view on this, Wendy?
I think there's a little bit of that, Tanya, but I agree that there isn't that there isn't as much as you think. I watch my son, literally, I listened to another podcast of yours and you were talking about how little kids will go up to things like television screens or books and, swipe it like it's an iPad. And I see my son do that. But the reality of it is that there's an innate curiosity that he has to seek things out. So, for example, he loves books. And there are times where the choice between a game, a Thomas the Tank Engine game and a book, he's going to go to the book. So I think that there is an innate quality in all of us that seeks to learn from different places and doesn't want to be lazy and wants to, and has that discoverability. And we just have discoverability in a different way. So I feel like, I think it's also a personal thing. I think it's a little bit about how you raise your kids, but I do believe that it's not as big of a crutch as you might think, because you still have to have the analytical ability to decide what information is important to you and why you need it and how you're going to use it. Do I think my son probably won't know how to read a normal clock because he can look at the iPad and see that it's 4:25? Okay, maybe. But at the end of the day, he still knows it's 4:25. So I don't think we need to get too hooked into that fear, because I just, in watching him, he's still fascinated by, how plants grow, and he's still fascinated by animals, and he's still fascinated. So he seeks to find out about them. And that's the important bit to me.
Okay.
And I also believe it's, something that was also said, the community, and really what's going to be important. And I see it moving forward is that community is becoming more, like Maxim was saying, than just being a part of something like Facebook. There's a desire to engage on a different level. And I think that in all forums, and it doesn't matter if it's television, movies, music, games, whatever, if we forget that we innately want to create networks and develop a community, a relevant community, that's where people, I think, are losing the plot. If technology can help, that's fine. People are always going to want to stand on the corner in some way, shape, or form, and have that exchange with their friends. And what I find fascinating now is where technology can lead us to have those communities. And you see a little bit, from the games industry. Why did RuneScape and, Jagex, why is it still a relevant game making a lot of money? It's nothing more than a community, of players.
That's a really interesting point in terms of community, and I actually want to take this back to Paul's point previously, and talking about this notion that there is this opportunity within music that nobody's quite tapped yet, of this notion of creating community, creating that kind of advocacy and fandom around the process. So it's not just about the gig itself or the music itself, it's about that lead into, discoverability, learning about the musician, going to the concert, and then following through what happens after that, and forming community around, that specific product. Is this something that you think, first of all, is something that will continue to emerge as a trend, Paul? But also, do you think this is something that's relevant to the other industries?
I think absolutely. My view is that as data becomes similar, as processes become similar, then the only things that are going to really differentiate one proposition from another are the ecosystem of people that put that together and take part in it and participate, either as consumers or co-creators, or the other thing that's going to differentiate it is the experience. The experience we have today. What we define as a good experience today is usually trumped tomorrow, and by something comes out. So the bar is continually being raised in terms of moving the experience forward. So I think you are going to see this. I think it's an interesting point around the point around fear. I thought was interesting, because I think what's going to happen is people are just going to become more and more educated and actually seek out their own content, their own groups, and then collaborate around and participate and engage with each other around things that they are passionate about. And I think what technology is doing is allowing that passion to come to the fore. So, if you've got a particular passion around an artist or a game or writing games or films or whatever it is, you can engage in that. You can find that now. And I think there's an opportunity. I really do see that trend continuing, particularly as you've now got enabling technology. So I think one of the other things that's going to come out is people are going to become their own brands, which sounds a bit cliche, but what I really mean by that is that they're going to use technology and content to find their own voice in the world. They're going to use technology and content to disseminate what's bogus from what's real, and then they're going to triangulate that with other people with like minds and interests and passions. And I think you're going to see that gravitation together. And whereas it was sort of handed down to people by institutions, so people would group round a newspaper or they'd group round a television channel or a program, I think it's going to be a lot more fluid and a lot more dynamic, and that's certainly what we're seeing from IBM perspective in terms of the volume and veracity of data that you now have to analyze to make sense. But actually, really, if you take some baby steps and think through beyond the technology and the data and think about the human experience of how do you create utility for these people, how do you create something that that they value, that they're passionate about, then that's what really becomes important. It's about how useful is it? What's the utility of it to an individual, and how does it help them get from where they are now to where they want to get to, either on their own or with a group of like-minded people.
So you're talking about this notion of the individual becoming the brand, and in many ways that mirrors the experiences that we see people go through when they are on a crowdfunding platform like Indiegogo or Kickstarter, as for example. Yes, there's a fair volume of people who use these platforms and really don't have the necessarily the full clue of what they should be doing with these platforms. But then you have these individuals who truly understand the power of collaboration with a wider audience, and how to build that advocacy around their individual brand and around them as an individual. I'm interested to hear from you, Maxim, because I think there are some interesting parallels here in terms of what you're doing with FilmDo and this notion of kind of bubbling up to the surface the individual brand or IP, if you like, on the platform. Do you think that there are parallels there within crowdfunding?
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I think that human needs have not changed in a very long time. And one of the needs is to be a creator and to share and to communicate. I think that one of the things we're doing is we're building an ever more nuanced, we use the word algorithm, but I think that's really exactly the word. Let's call it a system for examining user behaviors and then, as you say, allowing things to bubble up so that they are discoverable. So, if you've got somebody who loves kung fu movies, I read a lot of philosophy and a lot of technology. And when I go to the cinema, I want to see explosions and action flicks. So I, I'm going to watch those kinds of films. I get very excited when another Mission Impossible trailer comes out, something like that. I saw Kingsman the other day. It was quite interesting.
Cheap thrills.
So, as a user, I'm going to be watching those kinds of films, and the system is going to identify that. What I want to see in the future is, we need to, when Microsoft used to have the paperclip on Word, and it would say, oh, it looks like you're writing a letter. There was something about that was so deeply condescending and irritating that nobody could stand it. But if we can find a system that is somehow saying, I noticed that you're liking a lot of action flicks. By the way, there's a group over here of people who are really into action flicks. Maybe you should check it out. It's like that street corner thing where someone says, oh, yeah, there's a place that sells that kind of stuff. You should check it out. So, but again, I don't know how we can do this in a way that is nuanced enough unless we have something akin to artificial intelligence managing it. Because human behavior is so nuanced. At the moment, what we have is quite a blunt version of this, where, if somebody clicks on things a lot, the system thinks they're probably interested in it. And there's a beautiful example of a fail with this on Amazon that my mother lives in another country. She can't always get stuff that she needs. So she asks me to order it for her. And she asked me to order, she does ballet, so she asked me to order a lady's ballet outfit on Amazon and ship it to her myself because she can't get things delivered there. Absolutely fine. But then for about a month, I was getting adverts for ballet gear and teenage girl stuff. And, it was an algorithm fail. And so we need a system that's better able to identify behaviors in a way that, let's say, is not creepy. And I think one of the companies that's leading the way here is Google. Are doing very well with this. They're producing increasingly nuanced search results based on where you are, based on what you're doing. And I think within the social networks, we're going to start to see more of this. But we have to be very cautious not to allow cynicism to creep into the process. And these companies are there to make money, and I think that's completely fine. But they're obscuring what they're doing, and that's creepy. So you need to make sure that there's transparency, that you're showing people what you're doing, that you respect them, and that you're openly noticing their behaviors and saying to them, look, we notice you're doing this. And so for that reason, we're going to show you these kinds of ads. We're going to show you these kinds of links because we truly believe that's what you're interested in. But if we're wrong, tell us. And it needs to be a circle. It needs to be a cyclic feedback loop where users can say, no, thanks, but that's not right.
Sorry, Max, do you not worry that there might be then issues around privacy and that notion that we're losing a sense of privacy when we, talk about people like Google as a for example, who literally are getting an insight into all behaviors, because they've got the insight into, your Gmail behaviors, your calendar behaviors, your search behaviors. So there's many different things that they're actually getting insight into, and this notion of using that information and that data to, sensibly come up with a, algorithm or insights as to what people are doing. But do we feel that there is a risk inherent with that there's going to be a loss of privacy, or that a perceived loss of privacy?
First thing I would say is that yes, we are losing all of our privacy, and no, most people don't care about it. If you look at the news that came to light that Google were looking into all of your emails and using that data, when that hit the news, most people thought, oh, and carried on with whatever they were doing. A small number of people worried about it. But if you look at the root problem with the loss of privacy, well, first of all, let's talk about the benefits. The benefit is that you get targeted services, you get the information you need, you get access to facilities and conveniences that often make it worthwhile. The problem with the loss of privacy isn't really the loss of privacy, it's with the use of that data. And that's the second issue I would raise, which is to do with, ultimately, coercion. If you look at every judicial system around the world, essentially what it comes down to is, were you free or were you forced? And if you look at, if you go to a bar and someone big and rough uses physical violence to force you out of the bar or to stop you drinking your drink, that's a very clear, obvious use of coercion that we find unreasonable. If somebody selectively, sneakily, cunningly withholds information in a way that you don't notice, such that it leads your behavior without you realizing you're being led, it's still coercion. It's just that you didn't realize it. And one is no different to the other in terms of justice. So I think that really it comes down to how the information is used that really makes the difference.
Okay. And Paul, what's your take on that maybe from a music industry perspective, or even from an RBM perspective, in the use of data and whether or not that is something that we should be worrying about further down the line?
I think I would agree with what's been said so far in that, the worry about data privacy is something that media organizations stir up. Whereas in the reality and in practice, most people have one eye on it. And I think the point about, were you coerced or did you choose? I think there's enough legislation, albeit perhaps with not enough teeth yet, although there are EU directives coming down the line pretty quickly now in terms of taking a much stronger stance around data protection and data usage in terms of the ability to take action and punish organisations for breaches. But I think it's demonstrating the benefits of what can be done. So from our perspective, we've got Watson's cognitive computing technology, which is driving a tremendous amount of analytics that is looking at how do you cover the invisible dots, and how do you join those together and make sense of those to drive something that is of real benefit. So if you took a field slightly away from what we're talking about, but life sciences, for example, then the ability to discover new cures by trawling through 1 million blogs, 1 million journals, and putting all that information in, and then coming up with an answer that says, actually, it's this, then that's great. So something less, arguably less trivial, like media and entertainment, but still a strong need. The ability to say, okay, how do you connect someone to their passion? And I think the payoff is such, and the gratification would be that if you could serve up everything that I was interested in, so it might be. So I have a particular passion around keyboard technology. So if you could serve up everything that was going on at a real kind of geeky level, sort of, how are modern keyboards put together? Who uses them? Where are they used? What can they do? Take me into the BBC radiophonic workshop today in the 20th century, or take me back to when it first started. All those kinds of things. Serve that up, and then put it on a price point curve from free to super premium. And let me choose, serve it up and let me choose what I actually choose to consume, whether it be in snack sizes or whether it be sort of like a full-blown feast of something visual, something audio, or something mixed, or whatever. So I think in terms of privacy, I think there are enough constraints in place. I would also say there's enough abuse out there that goes on that hasn't been attended to for many years, and I'm talking 20 or 30 years, when computing first came into being, and I think that trend will continue. But I actually think the benefits and the gratification that provides will allay the real fears. But I think some people will look over the shoulder. I mean, we're talking in sweeping generalizations anyway.
Okay, well, guys, I want to thank you all for your time today. And before we round off, quickly, very briefly, can you let us know what your Twitter handle is or your website URL is that you would like us to take a look at if anybody wants to find out more about any of you? Starting with Wendy.
I'm at WS Rosenthal, and my hyperentertainment.com is our URL.
Awesome. And Paul?
At Paul Crick, that's Crick.
And Maxim?
Well, I'm at Maxim Jago, that's MAXIMJAGO, and maximjago.com is the website.
Thank you very much. digitaljamsessions.com